How can you best care for yourself and others? Is there something new and unique that wants to come through around that? What aspect of yourself, others, a project, a business are needing some nurturing? What risks are you willing to take to find purpose in life? What to struggle for? Dependency and independence. These are all questions and pressures that this cycle of the human design weather for April 21st to 26, 2025 will bring. Hello, hello. I'm Margot Fraser, your guide through the cosmic weather. As a certified human design professional and intuitive coach, I'm on a mission to help you know, love, and live the magic of your true nature. In this podcast, Human Design Whether or Not, we explore the conditioning influences of the planetary motions, the transit field. You can't avoid the conditioning pressures. You'll likely notice their effects playing out around you. But rather than you reacting and being pulled off track, this awareness will empower you to navigate the cycle, staying true to your authentic nature and take advantage of opportunities when correct for you. All right, let's get into the weather for this cycle. This cycle begins on April 21st at 3:06 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. That's April 22nd at 3:06 Universal Time coordinates. And it goes until April 26th at 9:39 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. That's April 26th at 3:39 p.m. UTC. Remember to convert that to your own time zone so you know when it starts and ends for you. We always start with the Sun Earth activations because that's 70% of the conditioning field. This cycle, the Sun's moved into gate 27, the trait of caring and nourishment. We're staying in the sacral center again for this sun activation. That sacral center is a motor that generates life force energy and is meant to be used towards work that is really satisfying. This trait is part of a minor tribal circuitry called the defense circuitry that supports survival of the species. So, one part of the defense circuitry is the genetic pressure to make more of us, right? And the other is, well, we had them, now we have to take care of them. And this gate 27, this is the part of caring for those offspring. In a larger sense, though, it can also be caring for our community, our businesses, projects, and so on. We had its electromagnetic, gate 50, the trait of tribal laws and values in the splenic center in the Earth's position in our last cycle. So now we're on the other side of that. Gate 27 brings the energy to care for yourself and to care for others. That's the pressure that's going to be here this cycle. What are you doing to care for yourself and care for others? Its keynote says the enhancement of the quality and the substance of all activities through caring. So you may find in this cycle you're more likely to be drawn into caring for yourself, caring for others, being cared for. The potential opportunity this trait brings is to learn how to care for yourself in a way that's not necessarily at the expense of anyone else. It's a great time to contemplate how you can enhance the quality of your own life. You might also learn about caring for others. And gate 50, that trait from the last cycle, that trait of tribal values and laws, might also have brought forward some wisdom around maybe where you've been taking too much or too little responsibility for caring. This is a trait where you can learn the difference between quality caring, smothering, neglecting, dependency, and fostering independence. So it can be a really great cycle for nurturing yourself and taking a little time for self care. The caution here is not taking responsibility for your own caring and wanting someone else to take that on, or seeing how someone else is caring for themselves and wanting that, but then not taking any steps towards making it happen for yourself. Have you been giving so much to others that you don't have anything left to give yourself? You're depleted. Is there a person, a project, an aspect of yourself that could really use some extra attention and caring? This is a really excellent cycle to contemplate these and act on your awarenesses. The Earth has moved into gate 28, the trait of the game player, also called the preponderance of the great. We also refer to this trait as the risk taker. It's in the splenic center, our most primal awareness center that operates in the now and is concerned with your health, well-being, survival. It's part of the individual circuitry that operates in a pulse of acoustic knowing and can bring through something mutative, something new that potentially could be very empowering. This trait is about taking risks towards finding purpose in life, towards finding out whether life is of value. Is there something beyond just surviving? It's part of the channel of struggle, and it can be a struggle to find purpose and value in life. Here, it brings an acoustic knowing in the now of whether to struggle or not, and what risks to take to find purpose and value. The potential awareness here is through listening, and that listening, that spontaneous acoustic knowing potentially could come in. Its keynote says the transitoriness of power and influence. Life is always in flux. Who or what has the power and influence changes over time. Every trait in the splenic center has a primal fear. And here it's the fear of death and the fear of not finding purpose in life, or finding that life is not of value. That's a very powerful primal drive for us to evolve. This is not blind risk taking, by the way. This is really rooted in investigating, getting all the details. That's the preponderance of the great. It's calculated risk taking. The potential opportunity here is to gain that awareness as an acoustic knowing in the now of what calculated risks for you as an individual to take to move forward on your purpose path to find value in life. What's really worth fighting for? You may gain an awareness that something you've been struggling for out of the mind's perspective is actually not aligned for you and not worth your energy. In getting into the detail, you might find out that a risk that you were contemplating taking is actually not going to be beneficial for you. Remember that this operates in the present. So if you're consumed about anxiety for the future or you're caught up in the past, you might actually miss that little pulse of knowing that comes through. So that's one of the cautions. Another caution is that your not self mind, your shadow mind could get overwhelmed by that fear that you're not going to find purpose and value in life. And you could end up then either shutting down or taking blind risks. With any individual trait, there is the potential for it to pulse into melancholy. And with this trait, it's the melancholy that you'll never find purpose or that life has no value. Okay, you might just go into a doldrums around that. If that happens, do your best to channel it into your creative endeavors. And listening to music that you're in the mood for can also be helpful in moving through that. When we look at these two traits together, you may find that there's an emphasis on taking calculated risks that move you towards greater, or the polarity could be there as well, greater or less caring for yourself. You could become aware of ways that are really unique to you in the way that you care. You could find yourself struggling to know how best to care for yourself or for others. Or you could take risks that create a necessity to care for yourself or that garner support from others and call in their caring for you. Let's move into looking at the channels being created this cycle. When the transit field creates a channel, everyone that doesn't already have it in their body graph, in their chart, is receiving the activation of the related traits and qualities. So there's a big impact that that has. We have one medium term channel that's coming in through this cycle. So it's coming in on April 25th at 4:45 p.m. and going until April 30th at 11:08 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Universal Time Coordinates, that's coming in April 25th at 10:45 p.m. and going until April 30th at 5:08 p.m. We have the moon moving into gate 21, the trait of the hunter, the huntress, and control in the ego center, which is also called the heart center. And it's a motor that generates willpower. Before the moon actually finishes its transit, Mercury will move into that gate and activate that trait. And that's why it's going for this longer period of time. They're connecting with gate 45, the trait of the gatherer in the throat center that's being activated by Jupiter. Together, they create the channel of the money line, a design of a materialist. This is part of the tribal circuitry. This is actually the tribal leadership channel where energy is exchanged for matter, resources, and back again. So think about, your work energy being exchanged for money that can be exchanged for material goods and back again. 45, that gate 45, this is the voice of the king, the queen. In modern day, most often it would equate to the CEO of a business that's really outward facing, that role, right? It's out towards the rest of the community, gathering support for the business. While the gate 21 in the ego center, that trait is more like the president who's inward facing, ensuring that everything in the business is getting done and people have what they need to accomplish what's needed within the business as a whole. The tribal traits always bring an underlying theme of mutual support, having support or not. This is a channel that's focused on resources and what you can really control or not. So you may feel the pressure of that when this comes in. Put some attention on your resources. It's the voice of I have or I don't have, I need or I don't need. And it can also have the more royal we in front of it. We have, we don't have, we need, we don't need. The potential opportunities this brings, well, this is a channel that is really associated with providing education to those that you support so that the whole, the family, the community, the tribe can all rise up together. The more people are educated, the more opportunity there is for that rising up of all. So it can be a very philanthropic frequency, very philanthropic channel. It could also support you in getting your resources together, right? Getting them in order and using your willpower to do that. The caution here is that because this is both the CEO and the president frequencies together, it could have you take this real do it yourself attitude or leave a job and go out on your own when it's not actually correct for you, according to your strategy and authority. You might also find yourself buying things, wanting to bring in resources, but things that you can't actually afford out of that ego will rather than what you really need. There could be a tendency to be over controlling, especially if you don't have gate 21, that trait of the hunter hunters, the trait of control in your own design. It's going to come in and be amplified. Window shopping might be a better way to use this energy if you really don't have the currency, so to speak, literally or metaphorically, to exchange for the material goods. If you have this channel in your own design, you'll likely find you prefer to work for yourself or, at a minimum, autonomously. It is, though, important to learn to delegate. 65% of people do not have the ego center defined in their chart, that heart center, that motor that generates willpower. So take a look at your own chart. And if you see that the little triangle to the right of the center diamond is white in your chart, that's what I mean by undefined. And this activation is going to bring in willpower in an amplified way within you. That's something that you could be really helpful for you if you need to push through something. But it could also have you making promises that you're not able to keep, because it can be really like, yeah, I can do it. I've got the willpower. I'll get that done. And then when this goes out, like, oh, where'd the willpower go? So yeah, you have to just watch for that. It might have you thinking that you can get something done in a time frame that's actually not realistic. So again, have to follow your own strategy and authority. We have two channels being created by the transit of the moon, which means they're just little tasters, little samplers. The moon only stays in a gate or a trait, activating it for about 10 to 11 hours, give or take. The first one we have comes in on April 22nd at 1:32 p.m., going out at 11:20 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. UTC, that's coming in at 7:32 April 22nd, going out on April 23rd at 5:20 a.m. We have the moon moving into gate 30, the trait of recognition of feelings, the trait of desire in the solar plexus, the emotional center. And it's connecting with its electromagnetic gate 41, the trait of contraction and decrease in the root center, being activated by Pluto. This is creating the channel of recognition of feelings, a design of focused energy that's part of the abstract experiential circuitry. The opportunity here is to get clarity from all the experiences that you fantasize about, that you dream about, that you might want to have. All the things that might be new for you, to be able to narrow it down to the one that you truly desire. The caution here is that you can't have any expectations and that there can only be one experience that you really enter into at a time. So you need to be patient. This is emotional. We always have to be patient when the emotional center is being activated to be able to get clarity. The next moon transit we have coming in is on April 26th at 1:45 a.m., going until 10:41 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. UTC, that's April 26th, coming in at 7:45 a.m., going until 4:41 p.m. We have the moon moving into gate 51, the trait of shock, connecting with gate 25, the trait of the spirit of the self, of innocence, of universal love, being activated by Neptune. Together, they create the channel of initiation, a design of needing to be first. This is an individual channel that can bring a pulse of knowing of what leap to take into the unknown, to stretch yourself, initiating you into a new sense of self, coming more deeply into yourself and being really centered in that. This channel is part of the centering circuitry, and that can be very empowering. And it helps you to accept yourself as you are. So that's really the opportunity here. The caution, though, is, and what we most often see in the way that it plays out in the world, is being very, very competitive. This is also activating that ego center and being very egoic in that. That brings us to our long-term transits. The long-term transits are created by the outer planets and the nodes of the moon. They are here with us for longer periods of time, years in some cases. And so your not self mind could start to think that they're part of you, even when it's not something that you have in your own design. And that gets a little bit confusing when it finally moves out. We don't have any long-term transits themselves creating any channels this cycle. So we'll just look at these individual traits that are being activated. The nodes, which have to do with our environment and direction, still sitting in gates 36, the trait of crisis, and gate 6, the trait of conflict and friction. They are in line 5. The north node is about our perspective and direction. What do we see when we look out into the world? So in that gate 36, that trait of crisis, well, we also have Venus and Saturn activating that trait. So the theme of crisis continues to be amplified. That line 5 is called the underground, and it can support you in seeing that no matter what, we can make it through crisis. We can get from being a novice to having that experience. Or we could see people really jumping the gun out of the pressure of this frequency rather than letting the change, the experience unfold in its own natural timing. Experiences are always cyclical, beginnings, middles, ends. We can't be forcing them, but that can be there. Saturn is also activating line 5 until almost the end of this cycle. But rather than being about what we see around us, it's bringing its qualities of limitation, constraint, discipline, consequences. So Saturn could support you in being very disciplined in moving through an experience and understanding that there's always limitations within them. Or if you jump the gun and try and force any part of the process, force the experience, there could be unintended consequences that you're going to have to deal with. You create a whole different kind of crisis. The south node of the moon has to do with what's in our environment, and it's in line 5 called arbitration. It has a developmental theme that we learn as we mature that says the faith derived from analytical diligence and emotional control that permits a higher authority to judge a conflict. In its exaltation, it says harmony furthered through the avoidance of direct conflict. The detriment is insensitivity to the concerns of others in conflict, where a party to arbitration sees itself as the best possible judge and will only accept judgment if it is the victor. So very much, arbitration, but I'm only going to accept it if I win. So the sides are sides in a conflict needing to be seen as the winner before they'll end the conflict. On a personal level, if you do have a situation that requires arbitration, this could be a really supportive frequency. Jupiter sitting in that gate 45, we talked about that already, the tribal trait of the gatherer, the king, the queen, the CEO. It's the only voice that the tribe has, that voice of I or we have or don't have. It's sitting in line 3 called exclusion. Line 3 always has a theme of trial and error. So here, if you're feeling left out of a group or excluded from something, excluded from getting access to certain resources, And that could be physical resources, material resource. It could also be knowledge resources, wisdom. There's lots of different ways that we can have resources. Well, here, there could be a way of navigating that, of finding a way to be included through the trial and error process. Or in its detriment, there could just be frustration and even violence could erupt at being excluded, particularly from being excluded from gaining or having access to needed resources. Jupiter can bring expansion. So it could bring expansion of either polarity of those expressions. Again, it's the voice of the haves and the have nots. So collectively, there could be a real clash if it's perceived that there's a loss of what one has or anything that a group feels they're being left out of or denied from any resources in question. This is a trait that can be possessive, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You have to be possessive to bring in resources. So it will bring attention to material resources and to what you have and don't have. And then you'll use your strategy and authority to determine if there's any action to take out of that. Uranus position is sitting in gate 8, the trait of individual contribution in the throat center. It's sitting in line 2 called service. So it could bring an unusual individual contribution. We have Uranus, which brings a kind of unusual nature, and we have an individual trait, which also brings through a very different, unusual quality to it. So we kind of get an amplification of that. So bringing through that unusual individual contribution to the whole through you that can really serve others in a beneficial way. And where it's just from you being you and not wanting anything out of it. There could be, though, also in its detriment, its polarity of, yeah, sure, I'll be an example through my unique expression for a price. All right, Neptune sitting in that gate 25, the individual trait of innocence, spirit of the self, universal love, another one we saw getting hooked up per se as one of our short-term channels. This is sitting in line 3 called sensibility. It has a developmental theme that says the recognition that innocent action does not in itself guarantee success, right? Even when it comes out of innocence, it doesn't always work out. And this is a lesson that Neptune could veil from you, or it could unveil from you. There could be a resilience here. This is line 3, trial and error. And line 3 tends to be very resilient and adaptable. That resilience here could allow you to withstand failure, not let it negatively impact you. It's trial and error. Didn't work out. Let me try it a different way. And on the other hand, the trial and error process, if you don't understand it, that it is to lead you to something more effective and efficient, yeah, it can be hard. It can be tough to go through. It could lead to depression and even crime, because here, this is the gate of the spirit of the self. And that spirit could end up being broken. So all the things that come out of that inability to accept failure and taking it very personally. Pluto sitting in gate 41, the trait of contraction and decrease in the abstract experiential circuitry. It's the gate of daydreaming, fantasizing about the next experience you want to have. Another one that we see getting hooked up for a short time this cycle. It continues to be in line 2 called caution, which says humanism tempered by pragmatism, being practical, dreaming about others, helping others, but in a practical way. Will you take action on it, though? Line 2, maybe not. Or are you expecting that just having the dream itself and sharing that is enough to get recognition from others? Remember that for any of these traits, if you don't have them in your own design, it's just pressure from the transit field. You can observe it all playing out around you. You can learn from it, but whether there's actually something for you to do with it comes back to your own strategy and authority. So don't let it pull you off or puppet you. Just learn from it or let it go. That brings us to the end of the cosmic weather for this cycle. If you want to run your own chart, you can go to jovianarchive.com. And if you're new to human design and you just want to understand the basics of the body graph at a high level, what's that red and black about that you see in the chart, the geometric shapes and so on. Maybe you want to know a little bit about the background of the human design system. Feel free to grab my free Human Design Basics mini course. It's at margotgfraser.com/human hyphen design. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I would be so grateful if you could give it a like and consider subscribing. All right, well, if it's correct for you, take the time to attune to what's really nurturing for you. Use these frequencies. You may gain wisdom around how you can care for yourself and others in a greater way and in ways that are really unique to you. Stay present to any knowings that come through you as to what's really worth struggling for towards your purpose and knowing that life is of value. If you do notice fear coming in around fear of purposelessness, I'm never going to figure out my purpose, I don't know what my next step is, recognize that it's likely coming from this transit field. So take a breath. Trust your strategy and authority to guide you. You're here to live as yourself. Okay, have a great cycle. Be kind to one another, and may you know, love, and live the magic of your true nature. Until next time, bye for now.